Good evening, my friends. Wherever you are tonight, I hope this message finds you in a quiet moment, maybe with the day finally slowing, the light soft on your window, and the noise of the world fading just enough for you to listen. Because what you are about to hear is not breaking news. It is something deeper, the sound of a continent quietly shifting its weight, and a story that begins not in Washington or Paris, but on the warm coast of Ghana, where the cranes of Seaport rise like silent sentinels over the Gulf of Guinea. The morning here starts as it always does. The rumble of diesel engines, the rhythm of shouts between dock workers, the smell of salt and oil in the breeze. Containers stack higher than the skyline, and cargo ships stretch across the horizon like floating cities. But beneath the ordinary noise of trade, something extraordinary is moving. Every crate, every shipment, every mile of rail being laid northward is rewriting a chapter of Africa's destiny. What once seemed like routine commerce is becoming something far larger, a quiet rebellion against dependency, and the beginning of an African future built on its own foundations. For decades, Ghana was known as the calm diplomat of West Africa, measured, polite, reliable, a friend to all, a partner of the West, a symbol of democratic balance. But while the headlines celebrated that stability, something else was brewing under the surface. Ghana was building, expanding its ports, laying new rail lines through the Volta Plains, investing billions into systems of trade that connected the coast not just to its own cities, but deep into the heart of the Sahel. Tema was no longer just a harbor. It was becoming a bridge between two worlds, the Atlantic and the desert, the stable south and the restless north. For Burkina Faso, a nation without a coastline, that bridge is nothing short of a lifeline. Every drop of fuel, every bag of grain, every tool and piece of machinery passes through those same gates in Tema before it makes the long journey to Ouagadougou. When a shipment stalls, prices rise. When a document is delayed, hospitals wait for medicine. To the outside world, it's trade. To the people of the Sahel, it's survival. And that's why Tema's hum, the constant movement of containers and cranes, has become the pulse of more than one nation. But the path from Ghana's coast to Burkina's capital is not an easy one. Truckers talk about checkpoints like wounds on a long road, 10, sometimes 15, each demanding another document, another fee. Every delay slices into fragile profits. Some traders say bureaucracy costs more than war itself. Imagine waiting weeks for your cargo to clear, watching your goods pile up under the equatorial sun while storage fees climb higher each day. Yet even through that frustration, something remarkable has begun. Early in 2025, Ghana's Port Authority and the Ghana Shippers Authority sat down with their Burkinabe counterparts. They agreed to eliminate taxes on transit goods and introduced a digital customs system designed to cut waiting times in half. It wasn't just reform. It was recognition that sovereignty can be built as much in spreadsheets and shipping manifests as in speeches and parades. By the time John Mahama returned to Ghana's presidency, that recognition had become vision. His tone was careful, diplomatic, but his message carried an unmistakable shift. Africa must build itself. No more dependency dressed as partnership, no more waiting for foreign approval before taking the next step. When Mahama welcomed Burkina Faso's young leader, Captain Ibrahim Traore, to Accra in February 2025, the handshake between them was more than courtesy. It was a signal, a new alignment in the heart of West Africa. They signed deals on energy, transport, and border logistics, but the ink on those papers carried the weight of generations. Ghana, once a gateway for Western aid, was now becoming a gateway for African independence. In the offices of Washington and Paris, the mood shifted. Analysts warned of strategic drift. Commentators spoke of Ghana's flirtation with instability. But on the streets of Ouagadougou and Bamako, something else stirred pride. For the first time in decades, the current was flowing north, not south. A coastal democracy extending a hand to the Sahel's new bloc, not as patron, but as partner. To the west, It looked like rebellion. To many Africans, it felt like redemption. Tema's cranes never stopped moving. Between 2023 and 2025, cargo volume surged past 18 million metric tons. The new rail corridor stretching from Tema to Makadan, the first 97 kilometers of a line that will one day reach Ouagadougou, became the steel spine of a new alliance. Ghana's engineers worked day and night. Burkina Faso's traders waited eagerly for each section to open. It was independence laid on tracks, not through revolution, but through logistics. Every kilometer built was a quiet statement. Africa can connect itself. Yet every revolution, even a silent one, carries shadows. Western institutions that once praised Ghana's stability began whispering about unpredictability. Reports circulated that Tema was becoming the logistical heart of a parallel economy beyond Western oversight. French and American diplomats began measuring cargo data like intelligence briefings, searching for signs that the Sahel corridor was slipping from their influence, but on the ground, no one spoke of geopolitics. They spoke of livelihoods. A trucker from Bobo Dioulasso put it simply, "If Tema stops, we stop breathing." That's the truth that rarely makes headlines. For millions across the Sahel, this isn't a chess game of global powers. It's the price of fuel, the availability of bread, the ability to keep a hospital running. Ghana's neutrality, its attempt to stay friendly to the West while opening doors to the Sahel, is not an academic strategy. It's a bet on survival, for itself and for its neighbors. Mahama calls it strategic neutrality, but neutrality in times of transformation is never neutral. Every container that moves north carries both hope and risk. Inside Ghana, the shift has ignited both admiration and unease. Supporters hail Mahama as the man restoring African dignity, the leader who believes trade can replace aid. Critics warn that cozying up to military governments could invite sanctions or spook investors. In parliament, debates grow heated. In the markets of Accra, traders speak more pragmatically. "We're working again," one dock worker says. "Let the politicians argue. The ships keep coming." And they do. Tema's expansion has created thousands of jobs, and the new rail project has pumped life into the country's northern towns. But the more the port grows, the more fragile the balance becomes. Western lenders monitor every policy announcement. Sahel traders still face informal fees on their journeys. And corruption, that old shadow, waits at every corner. Mahama himself has warned his ministers, "We cannot build independence on the backs of exploitation." Yet reports persist: ghost charges, redundant taxes, mysterious facilitation costs that cut into the dreams of small traders. The road to true fairness is as rough as the road to Ouagadougou itself. In Burkina Faso, the narrative plays out differently. Traore's government presents every delay, every policy dispute as proof of Western interference, a reminder that independence remains unfinished. State media calls Tema the test case of African sovereignty. If Ghana holds firm, they say, then the Sahel's alliance can thrive. If not, the old chains will simply find new forms. It's propaganda, perhaps, but it resonates. Because for once, Africans see the possibility of controlling the arteries of their own trade. Across the ocean, the mood in Western capitals grows uneasy. Washington sees Ghana as too important to confront, yet too independent to predict. Paris, still smarting from its loss of influence in Mali and Niger, views Mahama's outreach to Traore as betrayal. Editorials accuse Ghana of rewarding rebellion. But the louder the criticism grows, the more sympathy Ghana earns across Africa. Because behind every condemnation lies a familiar double standard that independence is only praised when it serves someone else's interest. Meanwhile, on the docks of Tema, the story continues in the language of labor. Cranes lift containers through the night. Diesel engines hum like a heartbeat. Traders and sailors share coffee at dawn. There is no rhetoric here, no diplomacy, only work. And maybe that's the real revolution. For generations, Africa's power was measured in resources extracted and policies imposed. Now it is measured in movement in ships and trains, in kilometers of rail, in the quiet persistence of nations learning to depend on themselves. Mahama knows the stakes. Every handshake northward draws a frown from the west. Every signed contract with the Sahel strengthens the perception of defiance. Yet he continues, calm but firm, telling journalists, "Trade is not treason. Helping our neighbors is not rebellion." The words are simple, but they carry centuries of weight. Because for the first time, Ghana is not asking permission to lead. It is simply leading. Still, the road ahead is narrow. Ghana must balance the demands of Western investors with the needs of Sahelian traders. It must maintain transparency at its ports, efficiency on its rails, and peace within its borders. A single misstep, a scandal, a delay, a flare of corruption could unravel years of progress. The stakes are immense, not only for Ghana, but for the entire region that depends on its success. If Tema fails, food prices rise across the Sahel. If Tema succeeds, it could redefine Africa's place in the global order. And that, perhaps, is what unsettles the old powers most. Because the transformation underway in West Africa is not one they can easily categorize or control. It is not an uprising or a coup or a campaign. It is a shift of gravity from aid to trade, from dependence to direction, from borrowed policies to homegrown priorities. It's happening not in conference halls but in cargo yards, in the rhythm of cranes and the rumble of freight trains. Night falls again over Tema. Floodlights wash the port in gold. The sea glows faintly under the weight of ships waiting to dock. From the air, it looks like a city of motion, a constellation of engines and steel. Somewhere out there, a vessel bound for Ouagadougou is being loaded. Containers clank, signals flash, paperwork clears. Each shipment carries not just goods, but the proof of possibility. That Africa's next revolution won't need slogans or soldiers. It will travel quietly, in containers and convoys carried forward by a generation that refuses to wait for permission. And as those ships pull away, you can almost hear it, the sound of history being rewritten, one shipment at a time. This is not just Ghana's story. It is Burkina Faso's endurance, Mali's persistence, Niger's hope. It is the shared pulse of a region choosing connection over control. For the first time, the lifelines of West Africa are being drawn not by colonial cartographers, but by Africans themselves. So tonight, as the cranes of Tema move against the horizon, remember this: what most of the world sees as trade, Africa feels as transformation. The old order is fading, not with noise, but with motion. And somewhere between the sea and the desert, between the polished diplomacy of Accra and the raw determination of Ouagadougou, a new story is being written, one of dignity, resilience, and quiet revolution. The tide is turning, the engines are already running, and through Tema's gates, Africa's future is beginning to move.